Hey everyone, today our guest is Hiro Kiga. He's a veteran or a OG of the Southeast Asia startup ecosystem, if you will. Hiro founded a company called Wallex, right? Wallex is a B2B cross-border payments platform. It's kind of like Wise, but for businesses. But the most important thing is that it was eventually acquired by MDAC in 2022. The company, originally based in Singapore, Wallex has actually expanded to multiple countries, right? Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong. But Hiro, prior to founding Wallex, he was an investor at Gree Ventures, investing in many startups across the region. I've known Hiro for years, decades even, right? And I think he's one of the only folks that I know who has transitioned from a VC investor into a successful founder. So with his unique perspectives on startups and M&A, I think Hiro is a perfect person to discuss how to scale and get a company acquired. Hiro, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. Doing good.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks for being here. I think this topic of acquisition is something that all founders kind of think about, some more often than others. But it's the dream, right? I think with so little IPOs in the region, the dream scenario would be to get your company acquired, right? Like Wallex has. So you're a founder who's done it, and I'm super excited to be speaking with you today. So let's just jump right in.
Sure.
Cool?
Yeah, and then on the topic of M&As or being acquired, right? I think a lot of the founders, especially in the region, is going through it the first time. So it's kind of natural to kind of like get some guidance or, I had to call up people who's gone through it, but there were not that many people as well, right? So I think it'll be a good, interesting topic to cover for the session.
Awesome. Great to hear it. But first, Hiro, could you just walk us through the origins of Wallex, right? Just describe how the company maybe first started and then share its growth story leading up to the acquisition by MDAC.
Sure. So I might take one step back on why I decided to become a founder, and then how that led to how that company led to becoming Wallex. Right? So yeah, as you mentioned, when I was at Gree Ventures, right, investing in early stage startups in the region, I never had any founder or operating experience before that. I was an engineer in a bank. So as I worked with founders, they would ask me for advice. Right? Hey, Hiro, what should I do in this situation? What should I do here? Right? And I'm like, dude, who am I to give you advice? How am I to give you proper guidance on how you should operate your company when you get stuck? And then you look at the US, the Peter Thiels, the Andersons, they've done their hard things, built companies and then went into investing. So it was kind of those moments where I realized that, hey, if I were to ever become a better VC, or if I were to ever go back into investing, and I earned the rights to go back into investing, then I had to go through a journey of a founder myself, right? Thankfully, that resulted in a positive outcome, and I'm here. But as for the origins, the idea of Wallex, it could have been anything, right? It could have been OTA, it could have been e-commerce, but just so happens that my co-founder back then came to me with an idea of doing something where, because in Singapore, there's a lot of tourists going in and out, right? And then we're like, hey, there's got to be a better way to exchange money, hence the name Wallet Exchange. And after kind of speaking to a whole bunch of people, doing a sector scan, we realized that similar ideas was happening, especially in the remittance for individual retail customers, but not many were doing for B2B, right? So a lot of back then, I spoke to a lot of startup founders and the VC network that I knew. They're like, hey, if you did this or if you started this company, or at least have the service to help us transfer funds to our developers in India, or OPEX in Thailand, whatever, in Indonesian rupiah, we would use you every month. And that was kind of our light bulb moment that businesses have recurring needs. So once you acquire a B2B customer, then the likelihood of them staying for you is longer versus retail investor. So that was the kind of start of the journey. Obviously, being a regulated entity, that means we have to get a license. I think the first 2+ years were the most challenging because we had to get regulated. But from then onwards, right, it was just a matter of building out your team, building out the sales infrastructure to go out to acquire customers, scaling. COVID was actually, we were actually a beneficiary of COVID because during then, businesses were still moving, just in different sectors. Yes, we took a hit, but businesses were still moving. And because in markets like Indonesia, where you still have to physically go to a bank to do a transfer, we brought that online, right? So in fact, and also I think our infrastructure was used to other, let's say, SME-enabled tech companies that were trying to go online as well. So we actually kind of grew pretty nicely during COVID. And it was kind of shortly after then that led to sort of us being an attractive M&A target for MDAC. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that, Hiro. Yeah, I think FX, I mean, before, Wallex and before Wise, FX was so painful, right? And it was so expensive, right? And I think you guys coming in there and just disrupting the whole kind of model that I mean, that's, I guess, why companies like yours and Wise are so successful.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, just for the viewers, right? Could you, and those who may not know, could you just introduce MDAC really quickly? Like, who are they? Where they're from? Like,
Obviously. So MDAC is a Singapore HQ company. They've been around since like 2009, 2010. So once again, quite an OG as well in the fintech startup space, right? Their core business is providing bespoke FX solutions to enterprise customers, especially to e-commerce marketplaces. So let's say if you're buying goods on AliExpress in Singapore, right? As a buyer in Singapore, you want to pay in Singapore dollars, but as a merchant in China, you want to get paid in CNY or RMB, right? So MDAC provides the technology and the solutions to guarantee the FX rate. Now they didn't really have a payments arm back then, but now combined with our infrastructure, now they're able to do first mile collections, last mile delivery on the payments combined with their FX. So it becomes like a one-stop solution for both payments and FX.
Awesome, man. Yeah, so I guess digging a little bit deeper into the acquisition, right? So, Wallex is growing, you're expanding to multiple countries, right? What was the motivating factor, right, to seek out a buyer, right? Was acquisition always part of the original plan for you and your co-founder, right? Or was it triggered by something, or what really kind of motivated you guys to go and find?
Yeah, I think especially in Southeast Asia, exits through M&A is always in your mind. Even like even from our early on seeds, pre-A pitch decks, we had like a slide of exit scenarios and potential buyers. Yeah, and also MDAC was actually not the first first company that approached us to acquire us. We had multiple ones before that, especially one during COVID, right? This was a European firm that came to us. They're quite large in Europe and the US, I guess more Europe, and they wanted to expand into Asia. But of course, when the world is on lockdown, there's no travel. Expanding overseas was difficult, and we were already a partner of theirs, right? So I guess that I think they saw us as a natural fit. As an Asia expansion play. Although despite the deal falling through, since then, we did have other offers or other acquisition talks, not offers. And then came MDAC. Although the relationship with the MDAC started back in 2019. We pitched to them for a Series A. Although back then they weren't really ready to make investments, but that was the start of a business relationship where we did some of their payments and they did some of our FX. Come 2021, their strategy changed into needing to grow or wanting to grow more inorganically, and we were just the right fit, right? We complemented each other. We worked on projects with each other, so we had a sense of comfort in terms of knowing the team, knowing the business.
Right. Okay. So it seems like it happened quite naturally, right? You guys already had like a partnership or like a working relationship, and then I guess what happened? I guess like how did it originate, right?
Yeah. I think back then another driver to sort of entertain the M&A talks was that we were also trying to do our Series B at the same time. Obviously, investor sentiments change. It was always very difficult for us to fundraise. Or maybe I was just bad at fundraising, or my co-founder. We both sucked at fundraising. But nonetheless, given these challenges, we just thought, hey, it might actually be better to work together with a company like MDAC, as in being acquired by them, right? And another kind of driving factor to choose them over any others is that obviously when you're being acquired by a company, you also want to know the health how well the parent company is doing, right?
Of course.
I think
Mhm.
MDAC being around for back then 10 plus, maybe 12 years, had a healthy balance sheet, had prominent investors, gave us the comfort that, hey,
Mm.
if we were to be part of the them, we'd do good, right? They will support us, they will support our growth. So I think that conversation also needs to happen on how they will
Right.
support your growth, on what my role or what our role as a company will look like. And then the conversation kind of happened naturally. I remember very
Mm.
fondly in maybe around May 2021, June 20, I think June 2021, the group founder, CEO, Richard, messaged me and asked if we want to have lunch, so forth. And yeah, from then on, it's just M&A discussion started to happen since then.
That's amazing. What
Yeah,
a dream,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I guess just to dig in just a little bit deeper and just to understand for myself too, I think from the moment that you had that lunch, right, with Richard, right, VMDAC Group CEO, could you just provide an overview, right, of the whole process, right, from valuing yourself, right, all the way to figuring out like the transition, your role at MDAC, what that would be like? Could you just share really quickly, like end to end, what that looked like
Yeah,
for
I
you?
guess in a typical process, probably kind of go through in three parts, right? The first phase is really getting conviction that you guys, both companies, wants to do this. And that happens through multiple discussions with the key stakeholders, the senior management of the buyer, senior management of the seller, and so forth, right? Understanding each other, getting to know each other, right? Because we already did that for the last 2 or 3 years, that part was very quick. That, hey, the conviction to do this together was very quick. And then the next stage is negotiations around valuation. And once that's done, it's like the legal documents and so forth. So that part probably took the longest time. I think that was maybe 80%, 80% of the process, right? And once
Mm.
that's done, it's about, once that's done, then it's about sort of post-merger integration. How does your team
Mm.
integrate? How does your policies align, and so forth? Yeah. The PMI can happen immediately for some companies,
Mhm.
or can happen gradually, which was our case, right? Because we had a lot of
Yeah.
autonomy operating as Wallex, we still kind of do. But we try to
Mm.
integrate where we can. For example, centralized functions. Like we don't need two finance teams, right? So our finance team report to
Right.
theirs and so forth. Yeah.
Then how long did that take, right, Hero? Like, again, like from that
Oh
moment you
yeah.
had lunch,
Mm.
right, with Richard, to the end where you actually, let's say, transferred your
Yep.
shares.
Yep.
To them, like, what was that? How long did that process look like?
So until signing of the share purchase agreement, which is like the main document you sign, that was about 8 months.
Mhm.
But because we
Okay.
are a regulated entity, we have to get approval from the regulators. So
Mm.
that took another 6 months. Yeah.
Oh
So I
wow.
would say in total
Mhm.
about a year and 2 months, year and a half until the launch, from the launch until the signing, and then the completion of the acquisition, which is where we can sort of finalize all the administrative processes, such as the transfer of the shares and so forth. Yeah.
That must have been one
Yeah,
nerve-wracking
well, I mean, the
year.
M&A, the regulatory approval was just a matter of time, right? It was just our kind of like
Okay.
investors nagging, hey, when is it
Mm.
happening? When is it happening? Right? And the regulators
Right.
kind of don't really give you a timeline. But the more nerve-wracking
Mm.
part was the all the negotiations between our lawyers and shareholders and all that. Yeah, those were there were some sleepless nights back then.
Cool. I just want to talk a little bit more about MDAC, right? Now you're part of them, right? Could you share some insights? And I think you did mention briefly about this, about their motivation to acquire Wallex, right? And maybe apart from just MDAC, what other motivations do you see other companies have when acquiring companies or startups,
Yeah.
if you will?
So I'll say MDAC had two primary drivers to acquire us. One is, I think MDAC's core business has been very concentrated to one product and to maybe like one or two customers. So they had high concentration risk. or dependency on very little customers, right? So when they raised the Series B round from a private equity firm, Affinity Equity Partners, right? They saw that they had to diversify their revenue base, their customer base, and their product base. Now, given that we had an existing relationship with them, and they saw that our offerings were very complementary to what MDAC had, it just made sense that we were the sort of right target to acquire. So I think one is the diversification of the revenue base and client base.
Got it.
And two is expanding their product offerings. Now, companies usually acquire other companies for, acquisitions happen for three reasons. One is you become so big that you can just ignore, right? And it just makes strategic sense to acquire it. This is like Facebook acquiring Instagram or WhatsApp, Google acquiring YouTube, right? The next one is companies get acquired to fill in the product gap. And I think we fill in that category, right? And that, given their expertise in FX, when they pitch to customers, they always, they always had a request for, can you do payments as well? And given that our infrastructure was catered to accommodate B2B transactions and their customers are B2B, we filled in that product gap that they needed.
Got it.
Right? Instead of building out that themselves, maybe it was quicker and to just kind of get us in. And the third kind of M&A reasons reason that M&A happens is acqui-hire, right? So this is like an example would be like Pi. There was a company called Pi back in 2014, 15 that Google acquired, and that was their first sort of engineering base that Google built out in Southeast Asia, in Singapore. Yeah. So for us, it was category number 2. We filled in product gap for MDAC.
Yeah, it sounds like a match made in heaven, right? But yeah, cool. Now you're currently with MDAC, right? I'm assuming that staying on with the company was part of the purchase agreement. What does your role entail now, right? And how does it differ with, I guess, what you were doing before?
So my role Wallex has sort of become the like a business unit or SME business unit for MDAC, right? So my role in terms of growing the business on the SME segment is still the same. However, Wallex has also become the kind of payments infrastructure, payments arm used by the entire group. So I kind of still sit as the CEO of the entity, overseeing, or being able to support the group by providing them the payments infrastructure they need that both our SME customers use, but also our enterprise or institution customers use by the group, right? So in that sense, I'm still looking after the day-to-day, operations, compliance, product development, maybe more or less of that, but making sure that our payments infrastructure can cater to the wider group requirements and then not just SME. Yeah.
Got it. So it seems like you're managing both, right? You have your own business, right, that you're growing, but also providing the infrastructure for MDAC and making sure that
one of the bigger challenges that we initially faced was that our infrastructure was mainly for SMEs, right? And then MDAC's customers are enterprise customers, e-commerce marketplaces, payment service providers. So there was definitely a period where we had to try to kind of beef up our capabilities so that we can serve their customer base. Yeah.
Right. More on the Wallex side, right? Does MDAC take an active approach in managing Wallex, right? Or the direction of Wallex? And if they do, and I'm not sure if they do or not, do they, like, how did you manage, I guess, like the integration or the cultural integration between your team and the acquiring company, right? Did that happen smoothly, right? Or were there kind of hiccups along the way?
Yeah, I mean, because our teams knew each other, right, already, I think the cultural integration was smoother than I think many other companies facing an M&A, right? I mean, I'm still here. I mean, if you talk to other founders that's gone through an acquisition, probably 7 out of 10 may have already left after 6 months to a year.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think MDAC took that much of an active role. More in the sense that they supported us, right? A lot of the backend functions that we were not very strong at, finance, so forth. Because they had a solid team already. We took on their support to build out those functions. In terms of our product development, sales, so forth, we had quite a bit of autonomy on that. Although now, because our product is being used group-wide, there is some support or there is some considerations we need to take into, or priorities we need to take into. Do we build this function for the SME? Do we build this function for the enterprise customers? But all in all, it's been a very collaborative environment between the two companies.
Yeah, great to hear it, man. I think just to go off on a tangent a bit, more like a personal question, right? I think you started Wallex in
2016.
Yeah. 16? Yeah, so it's like 6 years, right, of your life that you've dedicated to this company, and then seeing like this amazing outcome, right? I just want to ask, like, how did starting up Wallex and then eventually it having been acquired affect you personally, right? Did it take a toll on you? People talk about family sacrifices, or other personal sacrifices. I just want to get into the mind of, you as a founder, right? Grinding it out for like 6 years, right? Especially through COVID too, right? Could you just share a little bit about that, how you feel about it, at the end of the day, at the end of the tunnel, I guess, if you will?
During the M&A, right? The biggest changes thing I felt was relief, but just during the M&A, I always imagined that signing the paper would be like, that scene in Pursuit of Happiness when Will Smith kind of walks in the door towards the end of the movie, and the executives are like, we want you to come back in the next day. It was kind of that moment. Like, I felt that it was kind of that moment. I thought I was gonna cry. Well, I didn't cry. and I didn't sign documents. It was a click on a yeah, but it was kind of that moment that like everything past the 6 years that you grinded through, right? The sacrifices that you made. And obviously I was a parent. I was a first-time parent. I started Wallex when my wife was 4 months pregnant, and having 2 kids along the way, trying to support the family, doing whatever it takes to get through it. Right, moment of relief was just amazing. Yeah.
Finally sleep well that night, huh? Yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, just a couple more questions here, right? I want to talk more about the broader kind of like Southeast Asia market, M&A, right? The region is kind of known for having very little M&A activity, right? Maybe like 5 years ago, it was a little bit, hotter, right? What do you think is constraining the ecosystem, right? Do you think this is like do you think now is like a temporary cycle where like it's like the tech winter or whatever? Or do you think there are like deeper structural issues, right, with the ecosystem? All right, I know this is probably another podcast on its own, but yeah, just really quickly, what do you think about M&A in the region, right? What do you think is in the future, and what do you think needs to happen for it to kind of come back?
So on that front, I feel the tech winter is not helping, right? And I do think that there is a deeper fundamental issue in the region, right? Why the tech winter is not helping? We're like in year 3 of tech winter, and I thought there would be more consolidation, more M&As, right? But my gut feel is that those companies who raised at high valuations in 2021, 2022, that may be a potential to be acquired, maybe are just budging on valuation, right? And buyers are like, okay, you raised at a 50 mil valuation, but I think it's only worth 10. I don't think, shareholders or the founders would be happy to take that much of a haircut. So I think tech winter, or the tech bubble before the winter, induced high valuations, which are not attractable for companies to buy over even during this winter, right? And they were just trying to figure things out. Now on the deeper fundamental side, my take on the regional startup M&A is that I think there will be more opportunities if companies can build more sustainable businesses and don't have to grow gun for that kind of like, super scale growth, right? I mean, there are a lot of attractive companies there that are profitable and they might not be growing at 10 times week on week or month on month. But the optionality to get acquired at a lower valuation when you're profitable, I think makes more sense, or is much more wider. Right? It makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
There was a tweet that I read that said, selling your company, the outcome of selling your company for 50 million that you own 80% is the same as selling a company for $1 billion that you own 4%. Right? Now, which one would you prefer? I mean, yes, at $1 billion you become a unicorn, so whatever, but you already lost control of the company. But on the former side, the 50 million, there's much more opportunity. You have control, and you're probably running a profitable business, and that's okay, right? Yeah. So probably needs to have a founder shift. Perhaps we may see more and more of these sort of traditional type of startups getting acquired versus the hyper scale startups getting acquired. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that above. I mean, even before, like, who's buying companies for more than 100 million, right? It's hard to kind of buyers, right? So I think maybe the goal is just to, build a profitable business, get to a significantly high valuation where you can provide a incredible outcome for yourself.
And mind you, when you're buying a business, you're not only buying their customer base or revenue, you're buying their losses as well, if they have any losses. I mean, thankfully, I would say we were decent operators, right? Our net loss, monthly burn was like 50K, right? So would you rather buy a company that's burning 50K or burning $1 million? I mean, that's also
right. Yeah. Last question here, Hiro. I think, what advice would you give to founders, right, who are considering, selling their company, or maybe even like starting up their company and thinking about exit strategies, or well, I mean, given that the times are different now, right? But how would you advise someone about kind of this topic? I know you shared a lot about kind of the process, and thanks for that. But do you have any kind of like last kind of advice that you could give?
Two things. One on kind of like how to approach an M&A. Right, and this is advice that I got as well, and I feel that it's very true because I feel that it worked in our favor. You should always walk into the deal being prepared to walk out. Right, I think that mindset is critically important because during the first M&A discussions with the European counterpart, I kind of gave in too much until the point that my co-founder was like, "Hiro, you should step back from any meetings because you're just being too nice. You're giving in too much." And obviously, throughout the discussions that we had, having a Series B, bridge term sheet on the table also helped us kind of prepare walking into the discussion table with MDAT, being prepared to leave, right?
Yeah. It's that old adage, right? Like the person who cares.
Yeah. And Never Split the Difference. I highly recommend anybody to read that book. I had a Never Split the Difference checklist on calls, making sure I did each one. Second advice in terms of, I guess, exiting and so forth. This is something that Dirk from BNX told me. Good companies get bought, not sold. So if you kind of pressure yourself, or if you force yourself to sell, unless you position it well, right, you're kind of like signaling weakness. And I think the fact that, and this was the advice that I got when the first deal fell through, because hey, if a company like that is looking at you now, then there will be more opportunities down the line, and which is true, right? So yeah, I find that very. I kind of resonate that a lot because once again, the opportunities available when you're running a good company, I think is much more, right, than when you're trying to like panic sell and end up having to do a fire sale on pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, great. No, I think that's really good advice. Well, that's it today, guys. Thanks, Hiro, for taking the time. I think you can reach out to Hiro or myself on LinkedIn, right? Happy to chat with anyone about this topic as well, or any other kind of startup related topics. I hope you guys enjoyed